Lord of the Rings Conquest is essentially Star Wars Battlefront, with stormtroopers, speeder bikes, and AT-ATs replaced by elven archers, cave trolls, and balrogs. On paper, this sounds like a surefire recipe for success. Unfortunately, what should have been an epic single and multiplayer adventure is hampered by a slew of technical problems and poor design choices, leaving Tolkien fans and action gamers alike with a mediocre title that offers about a weekend's worth of fun. The first campaign in Conquest essentially retells the story of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. From the besieged walls of Helm's Deep to the cursed lands of Minas Morgul, players get to experience the entirety of Tolkien's grandest adventure from the point of view of both rank-and-file soldiers and heroic warriors like Aragorn, Legolas, and Éowyn. Once the first campaign is complete, the alternate history campaign, The Rise of Sauron, becomes available. This story plays out from the point of view of the evil forces, and assumes that Frodo failed in his mission to destroy the One Ring. It's morbid fun to decimate the Shire with a Nazgul and a band of warg riders, and the retcon fiction is surprisingly well supported by creatively edited cutscenes taken from the movies themselves. The story isn't 100% faithful to the movies, of course, but it does a decent job of hitting all the main combat-centered plot points. Sadly, the epic feel is significantly hampered by awful enemy and teammate AI, and a limit of about 25 characters on screen at once. While the Battlefront series may have featured laughable computer AI, tight, responsive controls and thrilling battle sequences made sure that both games were enjoyable, if flawed, Star Wars experiences. Conquest keeps the Cinderblock stupid troops, but loses some of what worked for the Battlefront series. Controls are a bit on the sketchy side, and the previously stable camera is now an erratic, unpredictable annoyance. Combat isn't as tight as it should be, but there are definitely some thrills to be had. Collision detection is suspect, and orienting your melee-class character to actually aim at an enemy can be far more difficult than it should be. Range classes like the Archer and Wizard fare somewhat better with their devastating special attacks, but are still subject to a game engine that feels distinctively last-gen. Defending yourself from enemy attacks is perhaps the game's biggest source of frustration. Blocking does little to stop enemy attacks, and once you're knocked down, expect to roll around on the ground for a while, all the time being clobbered by opponents. Cheap deaths are far too frequent, adding to the game's high level of frustration. Despite its many issues, Conquest still does a respectable job of putting gamers at the center of an epic struggle for mankind's freedom. The rare occasions where players are able to control massive beasts like the Oliphant and Balrog come as a bit of a disappointment. Controlling them is a sluggish affair, and the mounts have far too few hit points for being essentially defenseless. Surprisingly, smaller mounts like horses and warg beasts are even less satisfying and are completely impractical in combat. While Lord of the Rings Conquest may not win any awards for its visuals, it's not a bad-looking game by any means. Character models are passable, and while the environments feature some muddy textures and jaggy surfaces, on the whole, the look and feel of the game's various Middle-earth locations are relatively well captured. Split-screen campaign and online multiplayer modes are where the bulk of the game's replayability is found. Since the character classes are intended to work together, much of the frustration associated with the campaign mode is alleviated by adding a second player.
Capture the ring. Deliver the ring to the enemy camp.
Likewise, replacing enemy and friendly AI with online teammates and opponents makes the multiplayer modes far more satisfying than the campaign.
With one capture more, good shall have won this contest.
Conquest mode in particular offers plenty of chaotic, base-stealing fun. Overall, Conquest may not live up to its potential, but to call it a bad game would go too far. It's far from perfect, and the game's technical sloppiness and lack of polish may push many gamers away, but there are plenty of cheap thrills to be had in EA's version of Middle-earth.